I'd now like to introduce Jonathan Granoff. Jonathan is president of the Global Security Institute. He's also a member of the board of the World Academy of Art and Science. He's got a very distinguished background. I would urge you to read in the conference brochure so you don't miss anything. He's an attorney, he's an international advocate, really focusing on issues of human development and global security. He's been a pioneer and leader. I know Jonathan for almost 15 years now in the field of nuclear weapons and fighting on the forefront for the abolition of nuclear weapons in the world. He's also he's on the Lawyers Committee for Nuclear Policy in the United States. He works with the Jane Goodall Institute. He works very closely with Jane, with the NGO Committee on Disarmament, Peace and Security, Parliamentarians for Nuclear Non-proliferation and Disarmament, the Middle Powers Initiative. He's also the UN representative for the Permanent Secretariat of the World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates. He's been working for, I think, about 15 years with the Nobel Peace Laureates on where they get together to coordinate policy decisions and advocacy. So with this, Jonathan, I turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you, Dr. Laszlo, for convening this. The subject being paradigm, I thought I would go to the etymology of the word. The Greek etymology is para, beside, dignene, which is to show. So it's to show side by side. The Latin paradigma is to model or pattern. But I think what we are talking about is the worldview that organizes a great amount of social information that creates goals, values, perspectives, presumptions, but ultimately the paradigm through which we look at social organization and create social organization determines our definitions of success. It determines where we want to go, the way we frame the variety of information coming into us is really determined by the goals that we have. And I would propose that Gary pointed out the fact that there have been major paradigmatic shifts in history that we're all familiar with. And Yanni means a wise one, just talked about it in terms of teleology, that there's some ultimate purpose of consciousness evolving through humanity. I want to highlight two very distinct paradigms of the last that really were quite predominant in the last century, that both existed. Let me give an extreme one. On the Sicilian coast in the flat mangrove swampland of Indonesia, New Guinea, where land and water intermingle in a rhythmic ebb and flow, there's a tribe of probably about 600,000 people who live in a very, very close harmony with the environment. They call themselves the Azmat, which is the people, the real human beings. That's how they translate it. And everyone else, they called the Manawe, or the edible ones, because they, until very recently, 1990s probably, they were cannibals. The Azmat did not ever organize for total war. Their killing practices were ritualized, limited, and very controlled. But we ignore at our peril the fact that the so-called civilized nations of the modern world since World War II have spent astronomical fortunes in excess of $10 trillion since the end of the Cold War alone, organizing killing apparatus capable of destroying all life on the planet many times over. And the paradigm upon which this incredible social organization of killing is organized is based on the focus of security of the state. That the state, in a sense, is the goal of security, the security state. Last year, we spent almost $2 trillion pursuing security through military means. A very tiny proportion of that would ensure $20–30 billion would ensure vaccines for everyone on the planet. That same amount could be used to stabilize the climate and deal with many real security issues. But our paradigm of security, the way we organize ourselves, is based on what I would call what things that we've understood today to be highly mythical. The paradigm of security of our major institution, the state, is based on the myth of strategic stability. Strategic stability is immeasurable. It neglects the fact that cyber weaponry is global, non-local, doesn't recognize borders. It doesn't address the security of the health of people, evidenced by pandemics. It doesn't address the fact that 50 to 70% of our oxygen comes from phytoplankton, which depends on the pH balance of the oceans. Moreover, in the corridors of power where decisions are made about the security of the state, domestically, another paradigm is pursued based on a Roman paradigm of pursue peace, receive war. War is a consequence of weakness. Pursue war, receive peace, peace through strength. So domestically, in the debates of how resources will be used to obtain security for people, the pursuit of military advantage becomes the paradigm, which is utterly schizophrenic from the definition of strategic stability. The other paradigm of the major institutions of the modern world that are cannibalizing the environment is the corporation. Another way in which one is the way we organize security, the state. The other is how we organize how we feed, clothe, and take care of our economies, which is based on a paradigm that's mythical as well, to wit, perpetual growth. The natural world is not perpetually growing. In our bodies, if you have something that's perpetually growing and out of sync with the harmony of the body, it's called cancer. So our economic system at this point has reached a limit whereby if we were to actually use all of the fossil fuel reserves that are in the books of our major corporations as assets, we couldn't keep civilization going. So our paradigm through which we provide goods and services for people is inconsistent with reality. An interesting different premise for paradigm was proposed by one of the creators of the very modern world, Albert Einstein, in 1945, said, "Not until the creation and maintenance of decent conditions of life for all people are recognized and accepted as a common obligation of all people and all countries, not until then shall we, with a certain degree of justification, be able to speak of humankind as civilized." In other words, the responsibility of the individual is to all people. And that seems somewhat idealistic, but let's propose that it is not idealistic. It is actually the condition of the modern world, because pandemics affect all people. The climate affects all people. Less than 1% of the nuclear bombs, if they were to explode in cities today, would end the agricultural base of civilization and would affect all people. So the moral admonition of the wise and the practical necessity of today requires this shift of paradigm, this shift of perspective, this shift of values, because it's the only practical way we can survive. Because the problems we're facing can't be solved with the existing paradigm. Now, there is a paradigm that one could see emerging. It begins emerging, I believe, in the world summits of the 1990s, the World Summit on the Rights of Children, the World Summit on Women, the World Summit on the environment, the World Summit on Poverty, the World Summit on Habitat, out of which emerged a coherent human security agenda, which then became the basis for the Millennium Development Goals and are the basis for the Sustainable Development Goals, the 17 approaches to taking care of people. But there's no organizing principle to deal with the variety of these programs of virtue, addressing gender equity, environmental responsibility, food security, education. And I would propose that the organizing principle that would be most effective would be a human security approach. In other words, it's based on the premise that the legitimacy of the state does not come from God. It doesn't come from ideology. It comes from the ability of the state to take care of the basic needs of the people. The child that didn't die, the disease that didn't spread, the job that didn't get cut, the ethnic tension that didn't turn to violence, the dissident that didn't get silenced, the safety in your community, the resilience of your community, and the health of your community. It is the very foundation of economic, health, environment, personal, community, and political security, or security of people. Even NATO in its recent summit said that it would focus on human security. Of course, it defined human security in terms of how you deal with people in crisis, but it has to adopt a human security approach because they've discovered that the resilience of peace building and peace and violence prevention is based on human security, freedom from fear, from want, and from indignity. In other words, how do people live in their daily lives? That has got to be the foundation principle of the paradigm of both security and economic development. We're a long way from there, and yet we're a very short way from there. I'll give an example. People talk about the difficulty of setting forth global change quickly at scale. I'm a lawyer, been a law professor, and so I look at the institution of the rule of law as an essential pillar of any governmental organization and regime. The third party peaceful adjudication of disputes is an essential aspect of governance. So we have an international criminal court. Major countries are not parties to it. It's very weak. It's set forth a standard, but it doesn't have the resilience and strength necessary to bring about the change of conduct and values at scale. On the other hand, 40 years ago, when I was practicing, if you had a judgment from Canada and you wanted to enforce it in the United States, it was very, very difficult. If you had a judgment from a court in China and you wanted to enforce it in Kazakhstan, it would be very difficult. But today, trillions of dollars are engaged in finance and commerce globally because there is another system that the business community developed globally in the 10 years after the end of the Cold War. Very effective, very rapid, and very, very reliable. It's an arbitration system. So any international contract has within it a clause that disputes will be resolved in an arbitration agreed to by the parties and backed up by an international regime and treaties. So in the realm of commerce, we have global governance working very effectively, backed up by the infrastructure of the state. But in the realm of human rights, in the realm of public health, in the realm of peace and security, we still have paradigms that are incommensurate with the needs that we have. And the most gross one is the definition of security by military national pillars. We need a definition of security based on human security, the two pillars of which would be, one, the dignity of every individual, basically the values inherent in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and two, the application of science to understand our relationship to the natural world and the limits of commerce and development. We have to have strategic stability with Mother Nature. And last but not least, a change in values from the beginning of education to the grave, which is love people, use things. States are things, ideas are things, people are sacred. We could even have that understanding that there's a sacredness in the natural world. In other words, we're here to learn about something extraordinarily majestic and dignified. I won't go into that, but when a person realizes the dignity within themselves, and only can they realize the dignity within themselves if they see it in others. Doesn't that sound like the golden rule? Well, that's the paradigm shift we have to come back to. We have to bring the golden rule into the principle of the pursuit of security between states, within communities, and within ourselves. It's not a new paradigm, it's not a new principle, but it's the truth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was really inspiring
15 minutes, like you said.
and challenging.